Hello my students, I'm Mrs. Sama. I'm going to explain chapter 1 in Pride and Prejudice for the first prep. Now I'm going to introduce the characters of the novel. I'm going to divide the characters into two parts. The first part I'm going to talk about the Bennets. And the second part, I'm going to talk about the Bingleys. In the first part, the Bennets, Mr. Bennet. Mr. Bennet was an old wise man who was educated in London. Mrs. Bennet was an ignorant, stupid woman who only cared about getting her daughters marry a rich man. And 5 daughters: Jane, Elizabeth, Lydia, Catherine, and Mary. Jane was the eldest and most beautiful daughter of them all. Elizabeth, she was the heroine. She was wise, beautiful, and she could analyze characters. Also, we had Mr. Collins. Mr. Collins was a relative of Mr. Bennet. The other side, I'm going to talk about the Bingleys. Mr. Bingley. Mr. Bingley was a wealthy young man from London. He was handsome and unmarried. And his 2 sisters, Miss Bingley and Mrs. Hurst. Mr. Darcy. Mr. Darcy, he is the hero of the novel. He was a young man. He looked so handsome. He was Bingley's close friend. Also, we had Mr. Wickham. The writer of this novel is called Jane Austen. Pride and Prejudice is a novel of manners. It deals with behavior, habits, and morals. Also, we will see a great struggle in this novel later. Now I'm going to explain the main points. First of all, the incidents of the novel started in the countryside, where the new owners, or the Bingleys, came to stay in Netherfield Park. All the local families thought that he could be a future husband to one of their daughters. That's why there was a disagreement between Mr. and Mrs. Bennet about the coming of the new neighbor. Mr. and Mrs. Bennet had different reactions when they knew of the arrival of Mr. Bingley. Mrs. Bennet was very interested in that because all the time she thought to let her daughters marry a very rich gentleman, while Mr. Bennet didn't care at all. Mrs. Bennet and her 5 daughters attended a public ball in which they knew that Mr. Bingley was going to attend that ball. At that ball, everyone in the party found Mr. Bingley a friendly young gentleman, while on the other side, all of them noticed the pride of Mr. Darcy. Mr. Darcy was very proud of himself. Mr. Bingley danced with Jane, and he was very friendly. When he told Mr. Darcy to dance with Elizabeth, Darcy said that she wasn't beautiful as her sister Jane. When Elizabeth heard him saying that, she started to hate him, or she started to dislike him. Elizabeth promised herself that she would never dance with Darcy. Now I'm going to read the questions with the answers. Question number 1. Mr. Bennet preferred Elizabeth to her sisters. Explain. He preferred her because she was quicker to understand things than her sisters. Question number 2. Describe Mr. Darcy's feelings when he first saw Elizabeth at the ball. He said that Elizabeth wasn't as pretty as Jane to attract him. Question number 3. This is a quotation. I don't think it's necessary for me to go. You and the girls can go if you like. Comment. Mr. Bennet said these words to his wife when she asked him to visit Mr. Bingley, but he wasn't interested. Question number 4. Elizabeth made a promise to herself when she saw Mr. Darcy at the ball. She promised herself that she would never dance with him again. Question number 5. This is a quotation. You are dancing with the only pretty girl in the place. Comment. These words were said by Darcy to Bingley when Bingley asked him to dance with Elizabeth. Question number 6. Elizabeth's first impression about Darcy wasn't in his favor. Explain. Elizabeth hated Darcy and took a bad impression from the first moment when she heard him saying that she's not beautiful as her sister Jane. The last question, question number 7. The difference between Darcy and Bingley is clearly manifested in the first chapter. Discuss. Everyone noticed that Mr. Bingley was friendly, but Mr. Darcy was full of pride. Thank you.